The orbital station was silent during the night cycle. Most of the crew had gone to their private quarters, lights dimmed, corridors humming softly with the sound of engines and air recyclers. For Kathir, silence was rare and precious. His species, the Relnari, valued order above all things. But tonight his peace was broken, not by noise, but by curiosity. Kathir had been assigned to monitor the human crew member, Evan Cole. Humans were new to the Alliance, and many of the older species still found them unsettling, too unpredictable, too emotional, too reckless. The Relnari elders said that humans were a wild card, dangerous to trust, but too valuable to ignore. Kathir had watched Evan during the day, eating strange food, laughing too loudly, working with his bare hands on machines instead of using drones. Humans seemed to love touching things directly, like they did not fear breaking them. It was so different from the careful, measured ways of the Relnari, and yet somehow the machines Evan repaired always worked better afterward. Tonight, Kathir's curiosity reached its peak. The human had left his door half open. The soft light spilled into the hallway. Kathir hesitated. Entering without permission was against regulation. But his thoughts whispered, "This is your chance to learn the truth of them." Taking a careful step, Kathir slid inside. The room smelled different, like oil, metal, and something faintly organic like soil after rain. Evan was stretched out on his bunk, sleeping deeply. His chest rose and fell with a steady rhythm, his mouth slightly open, his face calm. In one hand, resting against his chest, was an object. Kathir froze. The object gleamed faintly in the half-light. Long, solid, and metallic, it was nothing like Relnari tools. It had sharp angles, heavy weight, and looked crude in design, yet strangely purposeful. To Kathir, it seemed dangerous, like some kind of weapon stripped of elegance. Of course, Kathir thought. The rumors were true. Humans never let go of their weapons, even in sleep. Moving closer, Kathir studied it. The object had no power cell, no glowing energy core, no visible circuits, just cold metal. Yet the human held it tightly even in slumber, fingers curled around it as if it were part of him. Kathir's pulse quickened. He imagined what this tool could mean. Perhaps it was a symbol. Humans clung to such things after all. Or perhaps it was some hidden weapon, primitive but effective, one they carried everywhere as a reminder of their violent history. Evan stirred in his sleep. His lips moved, mumbling half-formed words. Kathir's heart leapt in panic. Was the human awake? Was he dreaming of war? The Relnari bent closer, straining to hear. "Damn, bolts stuck," Evan muttered. Then he sighed and turned slightly, still asleep. Kathir staggered back, confused. What kind of ritual was this? Why would a human dream of bolts and tools while clutching this strange object? A dozen thoughts stormed his mind. Perhaps the human slept with it for protection. Perhaps it was some ancestral relic, passed down from warrior to warrior. Or perhaps, Kathir shivered, it was a reminder that humans trusted nothing but themselves. The silence of the room pressed in on him. The human's steady breathing filled Kathir's ears. He could not look away from the tool. Slowly, carefully, Kathir extended a clawed hand and tapped the edge of the object. It was heavy, solid, rough. He had never seen anything like it in Alliance toolkits. Why keep such an outdated piece of technology in this age of nanofabricators and plasma welders? Evan shifted again, clutching it tighter, and Kathir nearly leapt out of his skin. His long tail flicked nervously. If the human woke and saw him here in his private space, suspicion would fall instantly. The Alliance trusted humans little enough already. Kathir's throat tightened. He had seen enough. With a last glance at the sleeping human and his mysterious tool, Kathir backed toward the door. His mind spun with questions, with worry, with a strange sense of awe. Perhaps the rumors were not exaggerated. Perhaps humans really were the most dangerous allies in the galaxy, not because of their technology, but because of their strange, unpredictable ways. As the door slid shut behind him, Kathir whispered to himself, "This human, he sleeps with his weapon." But deep inside, another thought whispered louder. The next station cycle began with the hum of engines and the steady routine of life aboard the orbital. Kathir moved through the corridors with his usual quiet steps, but his mind was far from calm. All through the night he had replayed the image in his head, the human, sleeping, clutching that heavy metallic object. The Relnari people were logical by nature. They disliked unanswered questions. To Kathir, leaving a mystery unsolved felt like leaving a wound untreated. And now he carried two mysteries. What was the strange tool, and why did the human keep it so close? He entered the central workshop where engineers from 5 different species worked on station repairs. The workshop was loud, filled with the hiss of plasma welders and the hiss-click of drones. And in the middle of it all was Evan Cole, the human, sleeves rolled up, hair a mess, laughing as sparks flew from a console he was repairing. Kathir's eyes narrowed. The human had no shield gloves, no protective mask, only that simple band around his forehead to keep sweat from his eyes. Every time he moved, his muscles shifted under his skin with an effortless strength. He looked reckless, unafraid of burns or damage. Yet somehow the panel lit up with a healthy green glow when he finished. "Fixed," Evan said proudly, patting the metal. "See? Sometimes you just gotta smack it in the right place." Kathir's frills stiffened. Smack it? To him, machines were sacred. They required precision, respect, balance. But humans treated them like stubborn animals to be wrestled with. Still, the machine worked. That was undeniable. Kathir decided he needed answers. He waited until the shift ended, until the others left. The workshop grew quiet. Tools hanging on their racks, the smell of hot metal still heavy in the air. Evan leaned back on a stool, sipping from a small flask of water. His eyes were tired, but his grin was the same. Kathir stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Human Cole," he began. Evan turned, raising an eyebrow. "Evan's fine." "What's up, Kathir?" Kathir hesitated. Relnari culture valued direct speech, but this topic felt delicate. "Last night," he said slowly, "I saw something." Evan tilted his head. "Saw what?" "You were sleeping," Kathir said, his frills twitching nervously. "And in your hand?" You held a strange object for a moment's silence. Then, to Kathir's shock, the human laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but a full, hearty sound that echoed in the workshop. Kathir stiffened. "You find this amusing?" Evan wiped a tear from his eye, shaking his head. Sorry. I guess it must have looked pretty weird." Kathir frowned deeply. "It looked dangerous. Dangerous." Evan blinked, then laughed again. "You mean my wrench?" "Wrench?" The word felt strange on Kathir's tongue. Evan leaned down, rummaged in his bag, and pulled out the very object Kathir had seen. The heavy metallic bar with 2 shaped ends. He held it out casually as if it were nothing. Kathir stepped back. "Careful." "It's not a weapon," Evan said, still smiling. "It's just a tool. Old-fashioned, sure, but useful. My dad gave it to me before I left Earth." Kathir tilted his head, studying the object again. In the light of the workshop, it still looked brutal. No delicate circuits, no humming power core. Just raw metal shaped to fit a hand. "You sleep with this," Kathir said quietly. "Sometimes," Evan admitted. He turned the wrench over in his hands. "It's stupid, maybe, but it reminds me of home. My dad used it for everything. Fixing cars, building shelves, even cracking open a stuck jar once. When I hold it, I remember him. And when something breaks here, well, it still works." Kathir's frills rippled with confusion. "You mean to tell me this primitive tool is sentimental?" Evan's smile softened. "Yeah, sentimental and practical. Fancy plasma cutters are great, but sometimes you just need a good wrench and some elbow grease." Kathir barely understood half of those words, but he caught the meaning. The human was not clinging to a weapon. He was clinging to memory, to something personal. But the way he said it, so casual, so simple, made Kathir's chest tighten with unease. He imagined the human walking into battle with only this wrench in hand, striking with brute strength where other species used precision lasers. He imagined humans on their homeworld, solving problems not with elegance but with stubborn determination. It unsettled him. "Your kind is strange," Kathir murmured. Evan grinned. "Takes one to know one, buddy." Kathir bristled. "This is not a joke. The Alliance fears your people because of this. Because you do not think like us. You trust old tools more than new ones. You strike machines instead of tuning them. You laugh when others would tremble." Evan shrugged. "Maybe that's why we're useful. We don't always do things the smart way, but we find a way that works." Kathir turned his gaze to the wrench again. Heavy, simple, primitive. And yet, last night the human had held it like a warrior's sword. Today he spoke of it like a child's keepsake. Both meanings were true. That was the human puzzle. Evan stood, tucking the wrench back into his bag. Don't worry, Kathir. It's not a weapon. Unless something tries to kill me, then I guess it could be. Kathir stiffened again. You would fight with it? Evan chuckled. If I had to. Humans improvise. The Relnari stared in silence. His mind whirled with conflicting images. Human hands fixing machines. Human hands swinging that heavy tool in defense. Human hearts attaching deep meaning to objects of metal. Kathir left the workshop with his thoughts heavier than before. He had gone in seeking answers, and in a way, he had found them. But the answers only raised more questions. To him, the wrench was not just a tool. It was a symbol. It was proof that humans were unpredictable, dangerous, and yet strangely admirable. And Kathir could not decide if that truth comforted him or frightened him. The station rotated slowly against the backdrop of stars, its panels glinting faintly in the reflected light of a nearby gas giant. Inside its metal corridors, life continued as usual. Crews worked, drones buzzed, announcements echoed softly. But for Kathir, nothing felt normal anymore. The image of the human and his tool would not leave his mind. He had asked, and the human had answered. Evan had laughed, spoken of memories, and shown no shame. He had even admitted the object was old, primitive, a relic, yet Kathir could not accept it. How could such a thing be both worthless and priceless at the same time? The Relnari understood logic, data, precision. A thing had a purpose, and that purpose was measurable. To Kathir, this wrench was no more than a shaped piece of metal. It should have been discarded long ago, and yet in the human's hands it became something else. Kathir decided he needed to see it in action, not in stories, not in words, with his own eyes. The chance came sooner than expected. A junction in the lower maintenance deck had begun to fail. The energy conduits flickered, lights dimmed, and drones reported an unstable current. Kathir was assigned to oversee the repair team. As usual, Evan volunteered to help. When the group arrived, they found the problem deep inside a narrow service duct. The passage was too small for most repair drones, and the junction itself was an older model, installed long before Kathir's people joined the alliance. The plasma welder they carried was too large to maneuver in the space. The team hesitated. The Relnari engineers whispered among themselves, frustrated. The angles are wrong, one muttered. We cannot reach the bolts with our cutters, another said. Evan crouched, peering inside with a small handlight. He whistled softly. Well, there's your problem. Those bolts are stripped. Kathir tilted his head. Stripped? Yeah, Evan said. See how the grooves are worn down? Can't get a good grip with standard tools. But don't worry, I've got just the thing. He reached into his bag and pulled it out. The wrench Kathir's frills stiffened instantly. The others stared. To them it looked like nonsense, a crude piece of iron, heavy and inflexible. A thing from a forgotten age. Evan smiled, holding it up. Old tech for an old problem. Kathir frowned. That object is not rated for station repairs. Evan shrugged. Maybe not on paper, but it'll do the job. Before Kathir could stop him, Evan slid into the duct, his broad shoulders barely fitting through. He twisted onto his back, flashlight clamped in his teeth, wrench in hand. For long moments, the sound of metal against metal echoed from the duct, grinding, straining, the occasional muttered curse. The Relnari team shifted uneasily. They did not understand. Tools were supposed to be precise, clean, elegant, not noisy. At last, Evan grunted loudly, and something gave way with a sharp crack. He slid back out, sweat on his forehead but a grin on his face. One bolt down. 3 more to go. Kathir's eyes widened. You succeeded? Yep. Evan held up the wrench proudly. Sometimes you just need leverage. Machines don't care how pretty your tool is. They care if it works. Kathir watched as Evan returned to the duct. Again came the grinding, the mutters, the stubborn fight between man and machine. And again, one by one, the bolts loosened. By the time Evan emerged the last time, the junction plate was free. The human wiped his brow, laughing breathlessly. Now we can swap it out. The Relnari engineer stared in stunned silence. Evan looked around, confused. What? Kathir's throat tightened. You solved what we could not. With that thing, yeah, Evan said simply, tucking the wrench back into his bag. It's nothing special. Just a wrench. But it works. Later, when the junction was fully repaired and power stabilized, Kathir found himself walking beside Evan in the corridor. The human hummed softly, carrying his bag with casual ease. Kathir finally spoke. Tell me more about it. Evan glanced over. The wrench? Yes, the human chuckled. Well, like I said, it was my dad's. He wasn't an engineer or anything fancy. Just a mechanic back on Earth. Fixed cars, tractors, stuff like that. He told me, son, never throw away a good tool. A good tool will outlive you if you take care of it. Kathir's eyes narrowed. So you keep it for his memory. Exactly, Evan said, his voice softer now. When I hold it, it feels like he's still with me. Like I'm not out here in the dark all alone. He paused, then added, but it's not just sentimental. It's useful. New tech is great, don't get me wrong. But sometimes old solutions work better than fancy gadgets. Kathir tried to process this. You are saying an object may be both memory and function? Both symbol and tool? Yeah, Evan said with a grin. Why not? Doesn't have to be just one thing. Kathir fell silent. In Relnari culture, tools were tools, symbols were symbols. They were never mixed. A spanner could not be a relic. A relic could not be a spanner. But here was a human blurring the lines without hesitation. It made Kathir uneasy, but also strangely intrigued. He remembered his first thought when he had seen the human sleeping with the tool, that it was a weapon. And in a way, it could be. In Evan's hands, it could fix or defend, save or strike. Its meaning changed with need. That was the human way, Kathir realized. Not rigid, not bound, but flexible, adaptive, improvising. He studied Evan for a long moment, then said quietly, perhaps the Alliance fears you because you are not bound by rules. You change what things mean. You give them new purposes. Evan laughed, clapping him on the shoulder. Yeah, that's kind of what we do. Bend the rules. Break them if we have to. But hey, it keeps life interesting, right? Kathir did not answer. His frills twitched, his mind heavy with thought. For the first time, he understood the truth. The human strength was not in advanced technology, nor in brute force alone. It was in this strange ability to find meaning in anything, to turn even the simplest object into something powerful. And the Relnari, for all their logic, had no defense against that. That night, as Kathir returned to his quarters, he whispered to himself, the human's tool is not just metal. It is memory. It is adaptation. It is a truth we do not understand. And he knew that one day this truth might change the galaxy. The station lived in rhythm. Lights brightened with morning cycle, dimmed for night cycle. Engines hummed, vents sighed, drones whirred. It was a living machine of steel and air, but even living machines could fail. Kathir had just finished reviewing data reports when the alarm struck. A low, pulsing tone shook the walls, followed by the sharp voice of the command officer over the speakers. Warning, life support fluctuation detected. Oxygen levels unstable on deck 6 through 9. All engineering teams respond. Kathir's frills stiffened in alarm. Life support was the heart of the station. Without it, no crew could survive more than hours. Already he could imagine panic spreading. He rushed from his chamber, claws clicking on the floor. Other species hurried through the halls, some with eyes wide in fear, others speaking quickly into comm devices. The air itself already felt heavier, the faint metallic tang of oxygen mix carrying a strange unevenness. Kathir joined the engineering hub. Screens flashed red, showing dropping numbers. Oxygen processors in one of the central cores were offline. Backup systems were engaged, but they could not handle the full load for long. We must repair the damaged junction at once, the chief engineer ordered. Kathir scanned the data. His chest tightened. The failing junction was the same system Evan had worked near before. The old corroded pipes and bolts, the ones hidden deep in the service ducts. Kathir knew what that meant. The advanced plasma tools and drones would not fit. Again, the only path was through narrow metal tunnels. The team gathered equipment. High-tech cutters, microfusion welders, diagnostic drones, all the finest tools of the Alliance. And yet Kathir felt a heavy weight in his chest because he already suspected they would fail. As they reached the site, the truth became clear. The duct was narrow, old, lined with corroded panels. Steam hissed from vents, the air sharp and hot. Inside, the broken junction flickered with unstable blue light. Sparks jumped from frayed wiring. The bolts holding the core casing were fused with rust. The Relnari engineers tried first. They sent a drone. The drone whirred, stretched its thin arms, and failed. It could not grip the bolts. Its cutters sparked uselessly against the metal. Another engineer crawled halfway inside with a plasma torch. The angles were wrong. He could not get the beam to reach. He cursed and withdrew. The chief engineer's voice trembled. If we cannot release the junction, we cannot replace the conduit. And if we cannot replace it? His words trailed off. Everyone knew the rest. Oxygen levels were already falling. The crew was already coughing. The station was slowly suffocating. Then a voice spoke from behind them. Steady, calm. Let me try. Kathir turned. Evan Cole stood there, bag slung over his shoulder, face serious. His usual grin was gone. His eyes were sharp now, steady as iron. The chief frowned. Human, this is not the time for experiments. Evan dropped the bag to the floor. It's not an experiment. I've done this before. Kathir watched as Evan pulled out the wrench. That same heavy, primitive tool. It gleamed dully in the flickering light, simple and brutal. The other engineers stared. Some laughed in disbelief. Others muttered angrily, "A piece of metal?" One hissed. "He thinks he can save us with a stick of iron?" Evan ignored them. He crouched at the mouth of the duct, slipped inside without hesitation. His boots scraped against the floor, his shoulders brushing the sides. Kathir stepped closer, heart pounding. He could see Evan's legs sticking out, the rest of him swallowed by the duct. He heard the clink of metal, the grunt of effort. The wrench bit into the corroded bolt. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Evan growled low in his throat and twisted harder. The bolt groaned, shrieked, and finally gave way with a crack. Cheers rose behind Kathir. "First one's loose," Evan called, his voice muffled. Kathir's frills twitched in awe. The others had failed with lasers, drones, and plasma cutters. The human, with nothing but muscle and a piece of shaped steel, had succeeded. One by one the sounds came. Grind, crack, clang. Each time another bolt fell. Each time Kathir's awe deepened. By the time Evan slid back out, sweat streaked his face and grease stained his arms. But the junction plate was free. "Swap it now," he ordered, handing the plate to the engineers. They moved quickly, installing the new conduit, sealing wires, rerouting energy. When the final switch was thrown, the station shuddered. Then the screens lit green again. Oxygen levels began to rise. The crew cheered, relief washing over the room like a tide. Some clapped each other on the back. Others simply sank to the floor, breathing deeply. Evan wiped his brow, leaned against the wall, and gave a tired smile. "Told you it'd work." Kathir stood frozen, staring at the human. The wrench still hung from his hand, heavy and ordinary. Yet it had done what no advanced tool could. Not because it was special, but because the human holding it believed it could. Later, when the crisis was past and the air felt normal again, Kathir found himself walking with Evan down a quiet corridor. The human's shoulders sagged with exhaustion, but his smile was still there. "You saved us," Kathir said quietly. Evan shrugged. "We all saved us. I just had the right tool." Kathir's frills twitched. "No, you had the wrong tool. And yet it became the right one. That is what frightens me." Evan laughed softly. "Frightens you?" "Yes," Kathir admitted. His voice was low, heavy. "The Alliance builds machines to perfection. Tools for specific purposes. We measure, we plan, we calculate. But your kind takes something old, simple, unfit, and forces it to succeed. You make meaning where there should be none. And that makes you unpredictable." Evan's smile faded. He looked straight at Kathir, eyes steady. "Unpredictable isn't always bad, Kathir. Sometimes it's the only reason we survive." Kathir said nothing. He thought of the moment in the duct, the sound of metal giving way under stubborn human strength. He thought of the cheers when the screens turned green. He thought of the wrench, simple and shining in the flicker of sparks. For the first time, Kathir understood that the human's tool was more than memory, more than a keepsake. It was proof. Proof of what humanity could do. And deep inside, he wondered if perhaps that was why the Alliance had invited humans among them. Not because of their ships or their weapons or their knowledge, but because of this strange, stubborn will that refused to let machines or fate win. That night, as Kathir rested in his chamber, the memory returned once more. The first time he had seen the human asleep with the tool, he had thought it was a weapon. Now he knew the truth. It was not a weapon. It was something far more dangerous. It was human ingenuity, and nothing in the galaxy could predict where that might lead. Decks that once filled with the taste of thin air now carried a healthy flow of oxygen. Lights glowed steady, systems hummed strong, and the crew returned to their daily duties with relief in their steps. The alarms were silenced, but the memory of the crisis still lived in every corridor. Kathir walked slowly along the glass walkway that curved around the outer hull. Beyond the transparent wall, the stars stretched in endless silence. To him, they had always felt distant, cold, unreachable. Yet now, after what he had seen, the stars seemed less frightening. Because he had seen something stranger than the stars themselves. He had seen a human fix the unfixable. He had seen a simple tool save a station of thousands. And still, he could not understand later that cycle. Kathir joined the gathering in the central hall. Representatives of many species were present, tall Garin with their crystal skin, feathered Veyari clicking softly to each other, and his own Relnari engineers standing stiff with pride and unease. At the center stood Evan Cole, shifting awkwardly under the weight of so many eyes. His bag rested at his feet. From it, the end of the wrench gleamed faintly. The station commander, a stern Veyari with golden feathers, raised her voice. This human repaired the junction when no other tool could reach. For this, the crew owes him thanks. Applause filled the hall, hesitant at first, then stronger. Kathir watched Evan scratch the back of his neck, clearly uncomfortable. Humans, it seemed, did not enjoy standing in the center of praise. When the sound faded, the commander gestured toward the bag. Human Cole, your object. What is its designation? Evan bent down, pulled the wrench free, and held it up. Its steel caught the light, plain and unadorned. It's just a wrench, he said simply. A murmur spread through the hall. Just a wrench? Could this crude thing truly be the hero of the day? Evan smiled faintly. It's old. It's simple. It belonged to my father, but it still works. And sometimes when the fancy tools fail, this is all you need. Kathir felt every eye in the hall shift between the human and the tool. The Relnari engineers stood stiff, unwilling to accept such a thought. The Veyari tilted their heads, curious. The Garin rumbled softly, as if amused. The commander finally spoke again. Then let this be a reminder. The galaxy does not move forward only with advanced technology. Sometimes it is the will behind the tool that matters most. After the gathering, Kathir found Evan sitting alone in the observation deck, the wrench resting across his lap. The stars burned beyond the glass, silent witnesses to their small conversation. Kathir approached slowly. You do not enjoy the attention, he said. Evan chuckled. Not really. I'm no hero. I just did what needed doing. Kathir tilted his head. You hold the tool as if it is sacred. Evan looked down at it, turning it over in his hands. In a way, it is. Not because it's powerful, but because it connects me to where I came from. Back home, this thing fixed tractors, cars, pipes. It fixed small problems that felt big at the time. Out here, it fixed something big that could have killed us all. Different place, same tool. That means something to me. Kathir's frills twitched in thought. In Relnari culture, tools are tools. Symbols are symbols. We do not mix them. Maybe that's the difference, Evan said. His voice was quiet but steady. Humans don't separate those things. A tool can be a memory. A memory can be strength. We carry them both. Kathir stared at the wrench. In his mind, he replayed the moment in the duct. The grinding, the cracking, the victory of simple force over rust. He remembered the panic in the room, replaced by cheers when the green lights returned. And he realized Evan was right. It was not just the wrench. It was the meaning Evan carried inside himself. The next day, Kathir spoke before the engineering council. His voice was firm, though many of his own kind looked at him with disbelief. We must learn from the human, Kathir said. We measure value in precision and complexity, but the human shows value in adaptability. He takes a crude object and gives it purpose. That is why he succeeded where we failed. Some scoffed. One Relnari elder shook his head. You wish us to abandon logic and embrace chaos? Kathir's frills stiffened, but his voice stayed calm. Not abandon, expand. Logic tells us what should work, but adaptability shows us what will work. The human way is not chaos, it is survival. The chamber fell silent. Some looked uneasy, others thoughtful. The seed of an idea had been planted, and Kathir knew it would grow. That night, Kathir returned once more to Evan's quarters. The door was half open, light spilling out just as before. He hesitated, remembering the first night, the shock, the fear, the misunderstanding. But this time, when he stepped inside, his heart was calm. Evan lay asleep on his bunk, chest rising and falling. And once again, the wrench rested on his chest, clutched lightly in his hand. Kathir stood in silence, watching. But now he did not see a weapon. He did not see danger. He saw a symbol of a species that carried memory and function in the same hand, a species that could turn even the simplest piece of iron into salvation, a species that, for all its unpredictability, had something the galaxy needed. Kathir whispered softly to himself, "The human sleeps with his tool." Not because he fears the dark, but because he carries the light of his people within it. And for the first time since meeting a human, Kathir smiled. The lesson of the tool spread slowly through the station. Some laughed at it. Some dismissed it. But others listened. And in time, they too began to understand it.